Welcome to the Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with the Latina perspective. Welcome to Season 9, where we will talk about reflecting on personal stories and letting our brilliance shine. I'm so excited to share these powerful conversations. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Doctora Violeta Garcia is a dynamic executive coach and systems designer with over 20 years of experience in facilitation, training, and coaching. She's dedicated to empowering women of color to unlock their potential to live powerful lives. Doctora Garcia has a strong track record of transformative impact and is a trailblazer in fostering diversity for women in high-power positions, especially in STEM fields. Her multifaceted journey includes degrees in biological sciences, a master's in education, and a doctoral degree supported by the National Science Foundation, and a commitment to uniting communities for positive change. Outside of her world-changing endeavors, she can be found taking a stroll in nature, traveling the world, or enjoying a cup of cafecito while immersing herself in a book. Let's get into the episode. Hi, I am so excited to be speaking with Doctora Violeta Garcia and sharing all of her wisdom, knowledge, expertise. We connected through LinkedIn, and actually we realized that we had like a mutual connection through Samantha from the Hood Girls Travel To podcast. And so we were both guests on that podcast. Samantha was a guest on my podcast in a past season. So we are just elevating our expertise and sharing our stories. And I love it because we need more representation in all the areas. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Doctora Violeta Garcia, and I am the owner and founder of Ecosistema Design. I was born and raised in El Salvador, and I came to the United States because of the Civil War. And I was 8 years old at the time, but I remember thinking, we didn't know we were going to stay at that time. We thought we were going to come to Disneyland. And then my life completely changed after finding out that we were not going to Disneyland. But it took about a year for my parents to decide, yes, we're going to stay in this country. So I always had this kind of idea that, I'm going to go back to my country and we'll just be here for a little bit. And so once I remember missing playing in the cafetal. So my parents owned a coffee farm in El Salvador. And I remember like digging through the soil and looking at little bugs and watching decomposition in action. So I was a scientist from the very beginning. And when we came to the US, my teachers treated me as if I didn't know anything. I didn't speak English, so I must not know anything. And so I thought that was really interesting because no one asked me, what did I know about science, right? Or who, or what type of knowledge I had. There was just a big assumption that I came as an empty vessel with no thoughts or ideas, right? So I never share stories about the volcano and how beautiful it was to grow up in a coffee farm, things like that, until later on as an adult that I started sharing with other people those missed opportunities. But with that came this interest in science. And so I was able to, talk about cultura y conexión. My mom got us into a magnet school in Los Angeles. And the way she did it was she's like, what are the best schools here? And somebody told her, there's magnet schools. And she's like, what's that? So she went to the local school and asked, well, how do I find a magnet program? And they said, this school has one. But you have to be tested, gifted, and talented to be able to get in. And she was like, well, my kids weren't here in third grade. So what's the second best option to get in? And she goes, go ahead and fill out this application. And she was like, and bring it back. And if there's a spot, we're going to call you. Well, my mommy, she loves to feed people. So she filled out the applications and she brought them back with pupusas. And she's like, I remember the secretary was Costarricense. And she was like, oh, you're back. And she's like, oh, yes. And I brought you some pupusas. Well, we were on top of that list, So she got us in. And it was so fascinating because we spoke zero English at that time. I mean, we had been here for maybe a year, so we could pick up a lot of the English, but we weren't fluent yet. And they threw us into a magnet program. So it was really, really high level because it was, for kids who really understood all these concepts. And my mom was like, you know what? we don't know yet, but we're gonna figure it out. And so she would sit with us, and she would literally have her dictionary translating things for us. And my sister Karina and I remember sitting at the dinner table, and we would just like we were filling out worksheets and trying to process all this data. But then I realized, I'm like, wow, this is what it's like to be challenged and not know everything. But why not, right? Why not us? And so we pushed through. We pushed through. And then when I had a chance to go to high school, I remember getting this booklet that they had in Los Angeles. It was called the Choice Booklet. And you could pick from among different schools because we were in the magnet program. And I remember selecting math and science as my focus area. And I went to a STEM school, and I studied marine biology. And I was doing research in ninth grade, right? So all of a sudden I went from speaking zero English to literally doing research in English and just figuring it out. But what that taught me was that, number one, I can figure things out. Number two, you don't need to have all the answers, right? To just to do something. And I feel like we get frozen, especially in our businesses. And then number three was like, you know what? Somebody has to do it. And if that somebody's me, why not? Right. So that's how my early years started, and then I went to a school that focused in science. So I have a biology undergrad, and then I have a master's in education because I love just teaching people how to learn. And this came from a need that my brother had to say, hey, I'm working at Sears changing tires. And I said, what, are you kidding me? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like my parents did not come to this country for you to be changing tires. And I said, what do you want to do? And he was like, I don't know. He goes, I love cars, but I just don't know what I can do. And I said, well, have you ever thought about mechanical engineering? And he's like, what's that? And so I said, okay, I can teach you. I said, we can figure it out. So once I graduated with my bachelor's, I went back to community college with him, and I helped him figure out how to take classes, how to take English 101, how to take geology, how to take all these basic classes. And I used it as, oh, maybe I could be good in education. My skills could be used there, but also seeing how our system it's just failing so many of our students, right? And my brother being one of them, I thought I could do something about this. Like, how can I reinvest in him, right? And then that took me down a degree in education. And then I got a master, that was my master's degree. And then my PhD is in biology and education. So I kind of combine both passions. And I've worked in the government, in academia. I've had my own business for many years. And I've also been an executive director. So I've had a little bit of everything.
Oh my goodness. That is an amazing story and an amazing journey. And I want to go back and just highlight your mom's generosity, kindness with bringing pupusas to like just share. And it wasn't like that is such a cultural thing. Like we connect with food, we share with food, we love with food. And I think just sharing like a piece of you through food, it like goes a long way, more so than like just saying like here's my paperwork, here I am. No, you were being taught to make those intentional connections, saying like I see you as a person, here I'm giving a piece of me as up another person. And I just love that because uh, I am inspired by my father too, who is very generous, very welcoming, and always is like, okay, let's go out to eat. How can we get together over a meal? And that has been passed down through generations, and I'm hoping to pass that down onto my children as well. And uh, it just warms my heart to hear other people's stories of that, because I think that's like connects us all culturally, and it's just so beautiful. So I thank you for sharing that story. um, and I love that you just had the perseverance and the drive to continue learning. I think you said something that you realize that you didn't have to know everything, that you can just like learn as you go and take it one step at a time. And that's something that is not always like in us, like that's something that we have to learn. because we are faced with so many inequities and disadvantages that sometimes we overcompensate and think that we have to know everything or we will be seen as less than. And so it is just something that I'm learning to allow myself the freedom to not know everything and to say, like, you know what, I don't know this, but that doesn't mean I can't learn it.
My kids' school, they have this phrase. They go to an experiential learning school, and they have the phrase "not yet." Like whatever they don't, if they don't know something, they say, "I don't know it yet." And I'm thinking, what? How powerful, right? For us to allow ourselves the ability to just be human and not think we know it all, right? Because I think that that's something that we kind of harm ourselves, culturally, because we think, oh, if I'm not put together, if I don't show up as like everything that I'm supposed to, and this is interesting because we haven't even written this manual. Like, society has this unwritten manual, right? That we're supposed to be perfect, and if we're not, then you shouldn't even try. And I'm thinking, no, take your pen back. You write this book, right? And you could say, you know what? I literally launched my group coaching program that way. I said, people had been asking for it. And I'm like, oh, but I'm busy doing like my one-on-one coaching and my workshops and strategy and speaking, doing all that kind of stuff. So I kept pushing it off. And then one day, my own coach was like, so when are you starting that group coaching program? And I said, today. And she goes, okay, what do you need? And I said, all I need is a Zoom link. That's it. I already have the content in my head, right? Let me take down some notes. And the first coaching call, there was nobody enrolled yet in the program. And I just put, the title was Just Take Action, right? Just do it. Because we get so stuck in things being perfect that we get stuck in inaction because of that, because it's never perfect and it's never good enough. And so then there's a part of me that's like, what would the minimum viable product be? What's the basics, right? And then grow from there and say, okay, that went well, or could have done better. Let me try again, right? Instead of staying stuck in inaction. Totally. But I want to share something else about the culture piece, right? For food. So this is something that, going back to who's writing this story, right? So I saw that in my mom. I saw that she connected through culture. I saw that she had the networks, right? And one of the things that, in not staying grounded in who I was, I started letting society kind of take over a little bit by little. And so I remember I got to a point where I resented my mom making food for me, because I was like, Mom, can you just stop it? Like, can you just stop making all this food? And then also it was like she wanted to feed everybody, right? And so it's like, Mom, can you just please stop feeding people, right? But it goes back to, I studied in a European country, right? I came back to a very white system in terms of education, and seeing how parents didn't take care of their kids the same way. It was like, no, let me be me. Let me figure things out. Like, that individualistic culture literally took over me. And so I stopped speaking Spanish for some time, almost 10 years. And then I stopped like being appreciative of that food, right? And I remember when I was going through my coaching program, one of the issues that kept coming up was this conflict with my mom. Like, why do I have conflict with my mom? And it was because I could not accept her unconditionally. Like, I had conditions. Well, I'll love you if you only make one meal for me. I don't want you to make 100 pupusas, or 200 for that matter, right? And once I let go of that, saying, you know what, mi mommy is who she is and she loves through food. I don't have to eat all 200 pupusas because she literally makes me 200 pupusas, right? And some people were like, oh, that would be so lucky. For me, it's like anxiety. And so then I realized, I'm like, what if I could use that same, like, she wants to love me through food, but how do I share with my friends? So now I do 2 big parties a year, and I invite a bunch of people, and she makes pupusas for them around my birthday, and then sometime in January, February. So she comes twice a year, and I just invite all my friends over. So she still makes her 100 pupusas, but now I feed them to everybody else, right? And so there's this dynamic of like, how can we really hold on to those cultural assets in a way where it's not us trying to become somebody else, but instead embracing that for what it is, a gift, a strength.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I feel like I'm inspired to maybe do that with my own family and invite my father and say, like, hey, do you want to cook for everyone? All my friends. That is so beautiful. And I feel like I've also had a similar experience where I'm so pressured to fit into this American ideal, and like especially more pressure as like a daughter of an immigrant to succeed, and I use air quotes to say succeed, um, but there is this pressure, this ideal that we're trying to aspire to. And unfortunately, that has been to lessen ourselves and to just like fit in with the norm. And a lot of us have gone through this process of assimilation and are now trying to reclaim our identity because we see that there is so much power in it, and there's nothing like it's ingrained in us. There's so many things in our mindset, in our conditioned ideas that we need to address, that we need to either lean into or let go of. And it's like you can't hide from it. So all you can do is lean into it. And like you said, you had to come to that pivotal moment where you're like, I can either embrace my culture and accept what my mom is offering and find a way to have it fit in with what I'm doing, or continue rejecting it. And the thing that I love talking about is like it's so important to go through that healing process and that route of reclaiming for the sake of other generations and this multicultural society that we are living in. Because you mentioned that you felt this pressure to fit in and you went through this period of just kind of like distancing yourself from your culture, were there any specific instances or microaggressions that kind of led to that point that you like remember?
I think that a very subtle one was the notion that, and it wasn't really said explicitly out loud, but it was kind of like, oh, if you learn English, then you're going to get ahead in this country. So speak only English, right? And my parents never said that explicitly to us. They didn't really mind if we spoke English or Spanish to them. They would speak in Spanish to us, but if you don't actually practice vocalizing in Spanish, then it's harder. It becomes, I felt like my tongue was frozen. I couldn't say words in Spanish and put them together in sentences after a while. So I had to really relearn Spanish in Mexico. So I have a very academic kind of Spanish. But the interesting thing is that it's not blatant. It's very subtle and it's over time. It's almost like language loss happens that way, the way we dress, right? And kind of the colors that we choose. As a business owner, it was a little bit like because I was so much more aware as an adult than I was as a child. I thought, wow, this is really interesting. But the funny thing is that I actually believed it at that moment in time. So I went to one of my mentors who happens to be a CEO for a large organization here in Denver. And he asked me a question. He goes, well, are you interested in making an impact in your community, or do you want to make money? And I said, oh, I said, well, right now I want to make money. I said, because I know that I can have a kind of an exponential impact. And he's like, then you need to work with corporations and not with the Latino community. And I thought, wow, right? So it's like, it was so obvious, but I was in my head, I was like, oh, maybe he's right. So then I took a detour in my business. I've been open for 3 years. I've been in business for 3 years with my current company. And I remember last year, I thought, oh, well, if I can get like 3 or 4 big clients, like corporations, then I'll be good, right? And then it took a while to just even cultivate them. And then one of the things the way that micro aggressions showed up, and this happens to women in general, not just to us Latinas, but it's across the board. Because I went to a breakfast yesterday and they highlighted this as something that impacts women as a whole. And it's that women have to prove themselves and they're married essentially, whereas men are promoted for their potential. Okay. So, or even hired for their potential, right? So what they said was, people kept, as I interviewed and as I said, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it so we can, retain a diverse workforce. They would say, well, give me a case study. Show me you've done it before. And I'm like, oh, and so that's how it came in the form of like, show me proof that you can do this. Whereas a man wouldn't have been asked for that, right? So then it became like, do I want to fight against the system? Like, do I want to like do a little thing and then have a case study and show it to them? Or do I want to just show up as me and what my strengths are without having to prove myself over and over again? Because I think that merit is used as a weapon in terms of oh, you haven't, and we believe it too. Oh, I haven't done it before. So, well, guess what? If you haven't done it before, figure it out, right? And do it. And then you can actually move on to the next thing. But when somebody asks you for proof, that's their own bias, not just against women, but against underrepresented groups as well, to say we have to prove ourselves over and over again, even with the doctorate, even with, like having my business for 3 years, right? Like there's still this proof point that men are not asked for. As a matter of fact, we see it in VC capital investments. I have an idea. I'm going to create an app for blah, blah, blah. Here, millions of dollars, figure it out, right? We don't get that. That's the biggest difference, right? So there's this interesting dynamic between, now that I see it, I'm like, I don't believe it, right? Like, because I'm like, no, you're not going to treat me that way. But the reality is the statistics show that it's so real, right? Because right now we're getting like 0.03% of investments in venture capital investments, right? So there's that reality too. But to me, it's like, okay, what if I let go of that thought? What if I let go of the thought that in order for me to make money, I have to work with companies that are run by gringos, right? So once I let go of that thought, I said, who needs me the most? Who needs my services the most? You do, right? People just like you, Karina. And so there's a part of me that's like, what if I work with my own community? What if I build the assets that we have? And I truly believe in a different system that doesn't just put me at the center as a business owner that could potentially scale a business to millions of dollars. But what if I redefine this in terms of wealth building and say, you know what? I love that I can coach. I love that I can train, but I am one of a handful of bilingual trainers here in Denver, for example. And nobody's helping us, right? So there's a part of me that's like, okay, if I do that, and first of all, I got to tell you, like my clients are mujeres, women of color who want to stay in high level positions or who want to exit the system. And then I help them figure out what they want to do next. So we design their lives kind of thing. And then I do trainings for the companies they work for, or I work with nonprofits who want to build better systems for that same reason, to serve communities of color at a more impactful kind of way. So then I thought, what if I just embrace what's right in front of me, my cultural assets, right? What I'm good at. I know how to mobilize community. What if I embrace that? Well, I've built a multiple six-figure business off of that, right? And so there's that dynamic of like, no me la creí, like forget them. Like, I don't believe that. What if I could? Because guess what? We have like 62 million Latinos in the US, right? You know how much money we spend? Like we have money. What we don't know is how to invest in ourselves. That part we have to teach each other, because to me, it's like people don't even know about coaching, right? And I'm thinking, I wish I would have discovered coaching when I was in my teens. I mean, I coach my kids all the time, right? To say, what if I didn't believe the sticky BS, right? Like, what if I actually did something different and created something different? And so with my company, I said, what if we could do this? And what if we could serve women of color? And obviously being a Latina, it's like that first degree of connection are Latinas, but women of color in general, because we have so many shared struggles. What if I did that? And once I let go of that, money literally started rolling in, because I stopped believing my own limiting beliefs that I could only make money if I work with white corporations.
Hmm. That is so powerful. I am like my wheels are spinning in my head because I resonate with that so much. I think of when I was in the wedding industry and I was told that I would only succeed if I could relate to the white couples, because they were the ones that had money to pay for the service of uh, fine art photography, photojournalism, photography for their weddings. And so that is what I tried to portray. I tried to relate to them. I tried to hide all of my cultural identity. I wanted to hide that I had a family, and I presented myself in a certain way, but to my own detriment. And it only got me so far. And yeah, what you said is 100% correct, that we have been taught to believe these limiting beliefs about ourselves and about our community. And it is like, thinking back on it, like it's infuriating to be thinking of less potential for our own communities, our own peers, our own family. And so I'm so glad that you are sharing this, because I can relate to it in my own life. And I know that we are right here on this cusp in our generation, in society, where we are starting to shift that narrative and starting to see the power in who we are, and see the the potential that's already there within our community. And I love that.
Yeah, and things, simple things like paying each other, right, for services, things like that. Because I noticed the other day, so pupusas, good lord, they're expensive here in Denver, right? But I had to put it in perspective because I'm like, I've been to El Salvador. You can get a pupusa for like 25 cents, out in the rural side, and then the restaurant you get them for like $1 or $2, right? And then I come to Denver and they're like 5.75 or $7 each, right? And so I had to do a reset because I'm thinking I need to invest in my own community first and keep that dollar 7 times, just like the Jewish community. Like this idea that my dollar needs to stay in my community 7 times. So I will hire a Latina. I will hire my neighbor, right? The community that I live, that I value, and where I work, live, and kind of play. And I can go to Panera's and spend $15 on soup, and I don't blink an eye. I'm like, oh, ni modo, that's how much it is, right? I'm thinking I can buy two pupusas and it should not even cross my mind that it's expensive, right? Because to me, it goes back to that's what we're building wealth. So we can continue to support each other. So then we're not like codas over here, like, oh no, I can't spend $20 on a meal. But then you go to some fancy restaurant and you're like, oh, I'll pay $80, $90 for a meal. Why don't we do that with our own people? Right. And to me, it goes back to not only am I, and this was another thought I had. So I have a pretty big house. It's a 5-bedroom house and it has like 4 stories, kind of a split level, 4 stories. And I absolutely hate cleaning. Right. But in my mind, I had the cleaning is hard. I wouldn't want another woman or another person to be like picking up after me. Right. And my coach reframed that for me, and she said, "What if you see it as investing in a woman-owned business, a Latina-owned business, and not only are you helping that family, but they're also benefiting from your knowledge because you're always like chatty with everybody, right? So you're giving them scholarship information, you're giving them resource information, right? And they're cleaning your house as part of like the deal, kind of thing, right?" And I thought, wow, I had not thought about that, right? That I am actually hiring mujeres and building my network in a way that, yes, it's providing a service for me. It's doing things I absolutely hate doing anyway, but now I'm reinvesting in my community, right? And now I'm reinvesting in their families. And then they have money to be able to buy things for themselves, buy food, buy clothing, all the different things that instead of me handing it out as charity, they actually can pay for these things, right? That was a complete shift in my mindset. Especially because my mom cleaned houses. I had this like guilty kind of trip, and I'm like, man, my mom worked so hard cleaning houses all her life. Like, I just don't want to put a mujer through this. And I'm like, wait a minute, like that, she didn't mind. And I'm thinking that's they're offering a service. Let me take advantage of that in a way that honors who they are as people.
Exactly. And I think that also comes from us being able to deconstruct some things in our own lives, in this mentality that we have to do everything. Like, and if we don't have capacity to clean the house or take care of the kids, then there's something wrong with us. I remember when I was in the wedding industry and I hired a nanny, and it it took a lot, and there was some pushback from my family, from even my husband was like, "Oh, well, why should we hire a nanny?" And I'm like, I literally cannot do the work that I need to do and like be present with the kids when I'm with them. And so it was only for like a few hours during the day when they were little, but still like I had to push through that mental, um I guess it's a conditioned idea that I wasn't doing a good enough job because I needed help. And yeah, so I think that's, yes, twofold. And I think when we switch that way of thinking, not only are we healing ourselves, but we're also helping others in our community and lifting up the businesses that we are relying on and leaning on. And it truly is like a community effort. I think in the US, there's such an individualistic mindset that we just like are pushed into. And if we can't do it ourselves, then we're not good enough. If we can't run a business, if we can't work our 9 to 5, if we can't take care of the kids, if we can't cook, if we can't clean, then we're not doing good enough. And that's something that I am so appreciative of you sharing. That shift in that mindset is huge.
Yeah, speaking of mindset shift, money is another big one. And money is a good one because to me it goes back to I see systems. And so when I was an executive director, it was for a food kind of food-based organization, and we ran community gardens. And during the pandemic, we switched to emergency support, which we handed pretty much growing supplies so people can grow food for the time that if they had land, they had access to that. But then some organizations switched to handing out boxes, right? And it made me think about that. Like I remember when we had just came to the US, it was around Thanksgiving time, and my mom was handed a food box, and she was like, "What's this?" Like, first of all, we didn't even celebrate Thanksgiving, right? But then we got a bunch of cans, and talk about a cultural like kind of clash. Like she was like, "I don't even know how to open these cans. I don't know how to prepare this food," right? But it was like you should just be thankful for what you get, right? Period. And for me, it was like, yes, and like, thank you for providing food, but it's not even accessible to me to eat this. Like, it was like jelly. We're like, ooh, what on earth is that? Like, we were like making little monitos, but they were like, how do you prepare this, right? Because we weren't used to that. And so that cultural relevance was so important. But more than anything, the teaching a person how to fish instead of just giving them a fish was something I walked away with. So even with my coaching program, I realized I'm like, I made it really, really low cost to make it accessible for anybody to be able to join if they're women of color. And one of the things I thought about too is like, even if I get a sponsor, for example, for it, we're going to do a 3-month runway and give that, like cover the cost for 3 months. But the idea is that you figure out and we help you come up with $100 extra every month, right? Because to me, it goes back to this is totally doable. Like, and one activity I love doing is if you want to get out of debt, right? If you want to just say, you know what, I want to be able to afford X, Y, or Z. I never say, oh, cut back on your lattes. It's like, okay, then you got to generate more money because that's the beauty of this country. We really have unlimited amounts of money that we can make. But society tells us we should be thankful for making 6 figures, right? It's like, oh my gosh, my dream is to make 6 figures. I was like, what if I did that in one contract, right? Why not? And guess what? I did it, right? And so there's this dynamic of like totally possible, totally doable. And so we almost have to like push our boundaries and test ideas to say, what if I could? What if I could make an extra $100 a week? What if I could make an extra $1,000, right? What if I could just do that? But we are made to believe that, nope, you should be thankful for what you have. You should be thankful you have a full-time job and don't rock the boat. But one of the things that I really urge, especially women, Latinas, we are many times head of household, and it's to diversify your funding streams. Like we are hustlers. My mommy, oh my God, my mommy me metía en unas, like it was hilarious. She would go and learn how to bake, like take a little class on how to bake. And she's like, oh, I'm doing wedding cakes now. And we're like, oh my God, mommy, like, please. So she would pull out wedding cakes. I'm like, how on earth? But she was just like, she would just jump in the pool and she's like, I'll figure it out. Right. I mean, that always has been her mode of operation. One year, when I went to San Pedro High School in California, my teacher for student council was like, well, we're looking for a florist to do all the arrangements for graduation. Does anybody know? And I mentioned it in passing to my mom. Oh my God. You know what this woman did? She went to take a florist class at the community college, right? And this woman's like, we'll do it. And I'm like, oh my God, mom. And so we made like 300 flower arrangements that night. And she went downtown LA, bought flowers. We put them all together. And I was like, wow, talk about a spirit of like I'm just going to figure it out, right? I mean, she would get us in like huge trouble, but then once you're on the other side, you're like, man, we did that. That is so badass, like then she found real estate. Oh, good Lord, this woman was selling houses. So in a way, it's just fun to like think back and say, wow, that spirit of like, no tengo, but I'll just figure it out. Like somehow I'll figure it out. So that's how I think about my coaching program too. I'm like, part of what I want women to learn is that you can figure it out, right? And $100 is nothing, and it really like averages like $3 a day. So I was like, no, 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 like there is no excuse. Like let's figure this out because you not only deserve to invest in yourself, but you also deserve to have connections to other people who can be your cheerleaders along the way as well. Because surprisingly and unfortunately in our community, we also have the crab effect. When we see somebody rising, we want to pull them back down. And to me, it's like, I will celebrate you. I never see anyone as a competition. I really see collective power is what we need to really build that next level for our communities and our organizations, no matter where we're at, whether it's Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, New York, whatever community you're in. If we come together, like that really is, if you think about it, people are afraid of that. So what they do is they try to separate us, because if we're in conflict, then we can't rise together. But what if we said, no, we don't play that game. We actually unite. And unidas, we are collective power.
Yes, we are powerful. And it's something that we're learning to tell ourselves. And I think the more that we are in community, the more we can pour that into each other, and then it comes back to us. I love the fact that you said diversifying your income is essential right now, especially with so many layoffs in the tech industry and in corporate America across the board. There's so many layoffs, and it's not like, from what I'm understanding, it's not always personal. Like, it's just like, okay, whole departments are cut, and you can be the best, and you're cut. And if you don't have something to like sustain you, it's like that concept of having your eggs in one basket. Like, you can't do that. And a lot of times that's what we're taught, especially when we come to this country, that like, okay, your goal is to go to school, get a degree, get the job, and just focus on that. And in reality, like, I think back to my family in Mexico, and there's like people that are getting off of work and then making tacos and selling them. And then they're doing this on the weekends, making horchata and the pasteles for the parties. And like, that is cultural. But at some point, we were taught that that was not good enough.
Yeah, or for me, it looks different now. Like I'm not selling tacos, right? But guess what? I'm making hundreds of thousands of dollars in investments every day without, you know what I mean? Like my husband the other day, I was like, whoa, like this is, to me, it was a first. His company stock um made him by himself, right? He made $94,000 in one day, because when they do the yearly, whatever valuation. Well, somebody in the company made $4 million that day. You see? So there's a part of it, but you can't do that unless you actually put money to invest. So we're not even teaching our kids or our families. Remember, speaking of photographers, our family photographer was at an event, my brother's wedding. And she was like, oh, I got a job at a casino because, like to make ends meet. And I said, oh, tell me more. She goes, yeah, but they're offering me this like 401k thing. And I said, oh my gosh, I said, you got to take it. This is what it is. And you're going to be adding a little bit of money, but that money will come back to you when you're, 65. And she goes, oh, no sabía. So I was going to say no. And I said, no, like, and it goes back to, I wish she would have known that when she was in her 20s, right? Because it goes back to the doubling effect. My kids work for my company. I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they work for me, right? So the other day we were opening up the Roth IRA investments, and they can put up to 7,000 this year, right? And so we opened up the accounts, and then we did a couple of simulations, and I said, okay, if you put this amount right now and you add $100 every 2 weeks, let's do the math, right? How much are you going to have in 10 years? How much are you going to have in 20, in 30, in 40? By the time you're 65. And my 10-year-old almost fell out of her chair. She goes, Mom, I'm going to be a millionaire. And I said, that's right. Mm-hmm. From $100, because what she has is time as her superpower, and so we started putting money aside already. And that's another thing too, that I want our comunidad to look at us and say, that's what millionaires look like. They look like you and me, because why not?
Yes, why not?
Mm-hmm.
I think of, yeah, my kids are 13, and my son will be 10. Oh no, he'll be 11. He is 10. He'll be
Mm-hmm.
11 in a few weeks. And yeah, we're already talking about investing and teaching them that concept, but I'm also learning alongside them because I was not taught. Like,
Exactly.
the only investing that I know of is through companies. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, my husband is set up through his corporate job, but how can I then also set myself up and then set my kids up? And
Right,
so,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a lot
And
of learning alongside and then teaching the next generation.
yeah, and also not to be afraid. Like I have my suegra, she sold her house and the money's sitting there in a bank with like, the old rates, it was like 0.001 and you get like a penny. Yeah, yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars because she does not trust the banks, right? So there's also this dynamic of like we are throwing money away because we don't know, right? But just by taking that money and putting it into a CD, for example, a certificate of deposit, she could make a ton of money and it's literally free money, right? So I think hustling looks a little different as well, because that is one way to say, you know what? Another income stream is all of my investments, and I mean, there's a fire movement where people retire early. I'm not that like obsessed about it. Like I want to work. I want to contribute to my community. Like that's not what I want. I don't want early retirement and then living off of like off the grid in the middle of the desert or something. Like that's not my story, but I want to make sure that my comunidad does know that there are things that we need to learn. And yes, there's bad investments, I won't mention crypto, but there's kind of this dynamic of like, what can I learn and what can I teach others? And then kind of grow that collective wealth. Because to me, it's not good enough that I make money. I want my comunidad to make money too, you know? So
Oh my gosh. I feel like we could talk all day and a half. And I'm going to need to come to Denver so that we can hang out in person. But I, I think my listeners need to connect and know about how to get in touch with you through social, but then also in person. Like, tell me all the things. Like, what do you have coming up that people can tap into? And then how can they stay connected with you?
yes, absolutely. So I told you that my kids are working for me. So one of them is working on social media because I have, zero presence in social media because I don't want to spend my time doing that. And so I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn easily, Dr. Violeta Garcia. But my kiddos now, my communications person is teaching my oldest kiddo. She literally follows me with the phone and takes all this footage. So you're going to see me in social media more. So I now have an Instagram account, y'all. I have a TikTok account. So you're definitely going to be able to follow me. And in TikTok, we just uploaded a resource that would be really great for your listeners, your followers, and it was on how to manage your time and how to do kind of a thought download and say, this is everything I have to do this week and how do I organize it? So we did that. We have that resource available already there, and we'll be doing more, just kind of like how to get your life together in a way where you're in control and not saying every time somebody asks you, oh, I'm just so busy. It's like, what if you weren't? What if you were regulated? What if you were calm and connected, right? Then you would be able to make good decisions based on the information you have instead of always making decisions to put out fires. So that's part of my goals. So coming up though, I am putting together and I'm working with another abogada that's amazing here in Denver to put together a summit. We want to do 2 summits this year and we haven't finalized the dates because we have a lot going on, especially in March and April. So what the first summit's going to be visible, how to stand in your story and in your truth and power, right? Because we we think there's something wrong with us, but what if we didn't think there was something wrong with us? What if we said, this is who I am, and watch out world, I'm coming, right? And you get to pick you get to write that story for yourself. It's your life, right? You get that pen, take it back. And then the second summit is standing in your financial power, because I believe that it goes hand in hand. I look at my values and the legacy I want to leave, and not only do I want to have an impact on mujeres, but I also want them to financially transform their stories, because that's how power works too. Power works by keeping us poor. And so if we can kind of switch the script and say, no, I get to be a millionaire too. And it's funny because millionaire, like there's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. It doesn't look like what you think it looks like, right? It looks like, the investments I was telling you, and people actually making good decisions and paying off cars, and like all these things where you just decide that debt is a tool, but not where you want to live your entire life. That part I think is really important. So we're going to kind of dissect the financial pieces. And I literally started investing when I was 17. My first business was a tutoring company, and I tutored kids that were failing classes, my classmates. And my counselor was like, "Hey, these kids need help. You're smart. You can figure it out." I said, "Well, how much do I charge them?" It goes $20 an hour, and it was in San Pedro, California. So I was like, "Okay, I guess I could charge that." I was making $80, $100 a week. So I said, what if I just put aside a little bit of money? And I started investing when I was 17. And now that money, those first $1,000, they're worth like, I don't know, 50 something $1,000, And so that was just an example of how that one little tiny action became something huge. And then I added way more money after that. So that's just like just that by itself will be, $1 million easily. Not to mention my properties and things like that. So anyway, on that note, that's what's coming up. And then, like I mentioned, I have the online group coaching program that's accessible to anyone in the world. And it is for women of color who just want support, connection, and who feel kind of like flustered, stuck, or just looking for like, how do I even start? That's what we do. We have a monthly theme. This past month was unconditional love. And then this coming month is really helping to tell our stories as women and standing in that power. So we'll have a different theme every month.
That's so exciting. I am going to have to come to one of the summits this year, like for sure, because they sound amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and wisdom. If you could give one piece of advice for the next generation, and I know you gave so much wisdom already,
Yeah.
but if you can summarize something in a quick like little clip for the next generation, what would that be?
Let's see. I just spoke to a young person yesterday, and she said to me, she goes, "I didn't know people like you existed." And I thought that was really cool. So I think that reach out to people because they want to help you, but they just don't even know that you're interested, first of all. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask. Like your professors, your like build a network of people who will be your cheerleaders down the road. And this is a piece of advice that I can give a woman who's in her 50s or in her 20s, and it's people can't read your mind. So if you are looking for a specific role or a specific, position, you got to let people know, because you can't just say my actions are going to speak for themselves. They don't. You are the voice for your body and for what you want in life. So if you say, I want to become a CEO, you have to start sharing that, right? If you say, I want, like right now, so I need a connection to Cigna Healthcare because they're sponsoring an event here. And I'm like, oh, if I can get connection there. But you have to tell people so they say, you know what? I know somebody that can connect you to that resource. But if you don't share, you suffer in silence, and then you never actually accomplish what it is that you set out to do. So that would be my piece of advice.
Ah, that's so good. And I feel like that is a perfect way to close out this interview. I am so thankful for your time. I'm so thankful we connected, and I'm so thankful that you have shared so much knowledge with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we will definitely connect in person and see each other soon.
Yes, sounds good. I have a basement where you can stay.
Perfect. I'm there. All right. Thank you so much, and we'll see each other soon.
Bye.
I'm so grateful for a wonderful conversation. There'll be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot to post on Instagram and tag @elevatinglacultura or send me a DM. You can also comment on our YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating la cultura. And if you haven't already, check out the Elevating La Cultura Comunidad on Facebook. We also host monthly Comadre networking events, so if you're in Chicago, join us for one of those. All upcoming events can be found on the website elevatinglacultura.com. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.